Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the Great Legal Minds Show. I'm Kaustubh Mehta, your host. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to be joined by Sherbir Panag, founder and managing partner of Panag, Babu and Sarangi. Sherbir, hi.
Hi,
Welcome to the group.
Kaustubh. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be with you all.
Thank you. Sherbir is recognized as one of India's foremost white collar defense and investigation lawyer. Mr. Panag, thank you. And I'd like to start with how your journey began. Looking back, what were the defining experiences, mentors, and professional decisions that shaped how you approach the law and how that influenced you?
Thanks, Kaustubh. That's a tall order. I don't think I didn't come to law all by design. I wasn't somebody who sort of grew up with a very clear mindset that I will come and study law. I came from a military family. We have over 250 years of military service. So of course there was the element of pursuing that. I was also competitively shooting. I was part of the Indian shooting team. I used to shoot skeet. So there was a part of me that wanted to be a professional athlete. So the path to law was actually a very long, winding one. I, in fact, changed three colleges before I finally went to law school. I was in Loyola College, Madras, studying BCom. I was in Hansraj College in Delhi, also studying BCom. I moved to DAV College, Chandigarh, and finally I landed up at law school. But I think there were two or three threads that really worked. The first, the most cliched thread, I read a lot of John Grisham and Jeffrey Archer, and the cliche part that sort of helped develop an interest. But I think there was always a feeling of a very strong feeling of doing something that was right, doing something that was fair and just. That, of course, came. I was heavily influenced by my father, who was a senior military leader, and in the manner in which he led, both from the front and also set an example of integrity and courage. I was also, of course, inspired equally by my mother, who always told me, and my sister for that matter, that uh, if we ask for something nicely, make a strong case for it, are articulate about it, we can go a long way. And that being nice, pleasant, and clear and firm are key qualities to have. So there was this flow of integrity. There were books. There was a meandering mind. So it didn't come as I wasn't somebody who knew at age 10 or 12 that I wanted to be a lawyer. And that's really how law school happened. It happened as an exploration, and once I got into law school, I think things started clearing out a little more. Um, I think my generation started with the whole element of where the sort of what I call today is this internship pandemic kicked in, where everybody did multiple internships. And I figured out quite early on that this is an absolute waste of time. And I always was a little, I would say, with all the humility at my command, I was a little bit of contrarian to most of these things. And I spent a lot of time reading. I invested a significant point, and I just went in whatever direction that one's interest at that point of time lay in. And that's really how my sort of desire to pursue a career in white collar crime emerged. I've said this many times before, I wanted the fast pace of criminal law, and I also wanted, the rigor and challenges that corporate law put together, and that's how this emerged. Of course, there were cases at that point of time that were also both internationally and in India that sort of piqued an interest, but there wasn't a white collar bar as we know it today at that time. And this is where I believe mentors really kick in. First and foremost, my first boss, Abhinav Mohindru, who was a UK lawyer and came in, and I think he's really one of the first people who brought the idea of a modern white collar crime practice to India. He was at Kocher and Company. I was very fortunate thereafter to work with Zulfikar Memon, who was my former partner at MZM Legal. He was someone who I deeply admire. I have a lot of regard and respect for. I'd say Mr. Memon was one of the leading, was not, I'd say that he was one of the pioneers of the white collar crime bar in India. And the two of us held the same passion. We had different visions for it. And there couldn't have been a better time for two people to get together and ideate. But what I learned and what I think he taught me was how much space to give a colleague, how much space to give a peer, how much space to give a subordinate. If he had treated me the way the traditional mechanisms of how our practices get treated, um, things would have been very different. And I have a lot that I owe him for that. And of course, my colleagues at Roxine in Germany, who were at that point of time setting up the white collar crime bar, they're setting new standards there. Carl Siru, um, Oliver Zahan, and countless other colleagues who I worked with right at the thick of when white collar crime was changing. And a sort of governance and compliance in Germany was changing post the Siemens case. And the third person that I really want to give a shout out to is David Simon. David was is a partner at Foley and Lardner in the US. He really opened my perspectives towards how US enforcement views the rest of the world, and he was both a friend, both and a mentor and a fantastic colleague to work with. At the end of the day, all our careers, Kaustubh, are built as by a village. It's none of us, get anywhere really without the support of colleagues. So those were the early mentors. Then, of course, a fantastic team of individuals who I started working with when we founded PBS, who are now partners at the firm. All of them, we learned so much from each other. We were down in the trenches with each other. Jaskaran Bhular, Vidhi Khanijao, Lavanya Chopra, Guneet Gad, my former colleague Tanya Ganguly, and several others who've been in and out of the practice, with whom we've done this. And I'd also, in the same vein, and I know it's a long laundry list, but like I said, it's a village that builds a career. A lot of clients who not just were it's easy to say that somebody took an early bet. I don't think anybody takes a bet on a white collar crime matter with a law firm. It's a do and die situation, but it's how they helped push the law, how they helped um, push boundaries in terms of how do we respond, how do we contest, how do we settle, how do we move on, how do we get back into governance. And I hold several clients there who I hold in the highest regard, who really helped us refine our skill. And I'm going to name two. One is Pramod Rao, who was the former group general counsel of ICICI Bank, that moved over to SEBI, and from SEBI, he's now come into private practice and has just written a book. Pramod really pushed boundaries in a way on white collar crime enforcement, engagement with regulators, in a way that I don't think even the global GCs of the Fortune 50 companies would do. And I think that made me a significantly better lawyer. And then there is Jennifer Zerm, who was the chief compliance officer at Fortive, whom again hold in very, very high regard, whose commitment to compliance, governance, and ethics was remarkable, and how she went about walking the talk, leading from the front, establishing standards and benchmarks, I think were all elements that brought together and helped me as a lawyer and helped me as a professional.
Very, very interesting journey indeed, Sherbir. Now I'd like to talk about the firm that you built, Panag, Babu and Sarangi. When it was established, many successful law firms were pursuing scale and diversification. What opportunity did you see in building a specialist firm focused on governance, investigations, white collar defense, and TMT? What were the decisions, according to you, that shaped the firm?
So, so Kaustubh, I think starting with the front, there's law firms in general world over struggle with an innovation problem. And that's the part of the legal profession as well, from law students all the way to young professionals to partners at law firms. We unfortunately or fortunately, for what it's worth, have a bit of a herd mentality. We follow trends, we don't buck trends.
Hmm.
When I looked at the market, I felt that the large Indian law firms um, had developed the acme of skill when it came to corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, capital markets, and they could go toe to toe with the best in the world, whether it's a Kirkland or a Skadden or Latham Watkins or what say you. But on all the other practices, we didn't have the kind of depth that was needed in the economy and the market at that point in time. We were at this cusp where there were a lot of people, and that also happens, how the evolution of the Indian market happened, how the Indian law firms sort of emerged. But I'd say about 9 years ago in 2017, when we set up, we weren't going deep enough in practices that were left of center to corporate law. And my view was that we've got to go deep because this is where there are issues. This was before we had the level of enforcement India did have on white collar crime. We have to go deep. We have to be multi-jurisdictional, and specialism is going to get rewarded in high stakes practices. There was not then, and there still isn't the kind of commodification of law in practices that we were keen to have. And that was essentially white collar crime,
Hmm.
complex disputes, not the cookie cutter disputes, but disputes that sort of govern the boardroom, that are bet the company, that are moments that define whether a company survives or not, and technology laws and strategic transactions. So we felt that we're not going to be another, large outfit or mid-sized outfit that does everything. We will be deep, we will be market leading in what we do, and we will not touch anything we're not market leading in. So that was the vision with which we came together. We had to do a different style of lawyering. We had to bring together people. None of us had a bar. You didn't have a bar. The dispute bar was, of course, evolved, but not a dispute bar that would say this is an insolvency bar. This is a SEBI bar. It had not become that one bar that understands if this is a board cares about it, this is how we're going to do it. Same thing that happened with technology laws. It was the practices were evolving, but they were going into the genre of saying there's only privacy, there's only cybersecurity and other elements. But as the world's been saying for a while, data is the new oil. And so we wanted to bring together lawyers who understood different facets, were deep specialists, but also within our respective spheres, we were full service. So it's not like if there is something ancillary to one of our three core practices, it's not like we won't do it because that is so close and proximate to what our core practice is. For example, in white collar crime law, I'm always dealing with exits of employees. So I'm not an employment lawyer, but unfortunately, my team and I, and my colleagues and I, we deal with so many questions of employment law, and some of the most landmark cases on employee terminations and exits have come through our practice. So there are corollaries that kick in, and that was the vision: one firm, one country, and one team that can be everywhere, not fragmented by city, state, here, there, or not. And our specialism has to count as being specialists. It's not so in the early years, it was a lot of struggle internally because we had to say no to cookie cutter. We had to say no to elements that law firms would traditionally say, let's bring this work in. It's good work, it's retainer work, it's recurring work. We had to say no to that. All our practices as they stand today, our entire client cap table, if I have to draw a reference between a cap table and our top clients, every 3 years will look entirely different, save and except technology, because that's one place where you have deeply embedded large organizations that sort of have stayed in pole position for a significantly long time. But everywhere else, our entire client pool changes every 3 years. So we may, depending upon the flavor of the day, the dispute of the day, the enforcement or regulatory action of the day. So that's how we did it. We recast, our practice names are the same as, what lots of others do have, but at our core and soul, it's a different style of lawyering. It's specialist lawyering, and it's not lawyering that deals with 400 cases a year. It's lawyering that deals with the largest, marquee, most defining cases of the year, but then has the highest quality of lawyers only doing that. And that was the sort of vision. That's what we stayed true to. It wasn't always easy, but it's soon, given us the kind of rewards that we wanted to. And, today I'd say that if you're looking at the DAX 40 or the FTSE or the Fortune 50, or even amongst the Nifty 50, there's very rarely a client or a matter that intersects with our three practices that wouldn't pass through one of our desks.
Commendable. I mean, the practice that you've built is like kudos to you for, making a law firm that is specialist in white collar crime and governance and investigations, which is something that a lot of people have not done. Like a full service law firms, there are many, but in this particular segment and practice area, we have very less number of law firms in India.
For all three practices, not just
Yes.
white collar crime,
Yes.
both for the white collar practice, for our complex disputes practice, and our tech practice. I think the philosophy has largely been uniform.
Yes. So you have largely been, involved in these areas. So how differently does Panag, Babu, and Sarangi, approaches a white collar crime matter when it comes to you? What is the differentiator?
Couple of things. First and foremost is we don't let the tail wag the dog, which is we don't let procedure of a particular jurisdiction, a particular court, a particular regulator wag where the tail's wagging the dog.
Right.
You've got to have a big picture, and we understand multi-jurisdictional cases. If there's a French company listed on the US stock exchange with an Indian problem, it's an Indian, French, and American problem. Now, if we are going to give traditional advice of saying, no, under Indian criminal law, you don't have to do this. In Indian criminal law, you don't disclose anything to the enforcement bodies. In France, under SAPIN 2, you disclose significantly more. And in the US, if you don't disclose, you don't get cooperation credit. So the models are entirely different. In India, we go to trial. In the US, you almost virtually never go to trial. It's an entire mechanism of enforcement that the prosecutor leads. Very rarely do you pick trial, and most of the times you end up with either a deferred prosecution agreement, a non-prosecution agreement, or a settlement of different shapes and forms. And that's two very different worlds colliding. So first and foremost, we understand that world, that the Indian market is important, critically important economically and otherwise, but at the same point of time, there are other ponds in the world that you need to be concerned with. So I think first and foremost is this is a very deeply ingrained element in the culture of our lawyering, is pushing the boundaries, is understanding the multi-jurisdictional nature of our matters really well. I think secondly was that the entire white collar crime bar in India has really emerged from people who've sidestepped from other practices, whether it's somebody who was doing M&A earlier and is now doing white collar, somebody was arbitration and now doing white collar. We took a call that we will build out our criminal law expertise, and a lot of the folks who joined us went through the grinder of building criminal law, regulatory, and enforcement expertise right from the word go. So I think what distinguishes us is that a white collar crime matter is not just an investigation or an ethics issue. It's a criminal law issue. Somebody goes to jail, you either get fines and penalties, you get blacklisted, you get debarred. The stakes are high. You can't play with clients by not having that expertise in-house. And I think the third is sort of promoting a culture where in we bring a 360-degree view to the matter,
Hmm.
which I'm sure excellent lawyers across firms and across the world do. But that's a hallmark that we believe very strongly in. When we are on a matter, you can pick any lawyer and they will know virtually everything that's happening on the matter as it's proceeding. The associate to the partner to the principal associates, all of us get marked on all correspondence, and all of us know how the matter is incrementally moving at every given point in time. I think that brings in a little bit of cohesion to the team so we're not in silos. And that also helps us understand the product that the client is and the line of business they are in exceptionally well. Now, none of this is rocket science. These are qualitative factors. So I'm not going to claim them to be, and these are aspirational standards for everybody. But I will say that in the early years of when we were setting up and pioneering the modern white collar crime bar, which was attuned to what was there in DC, London, Frankfurt, um, I think these were factors that really distinguished us from everyone else, and that also gave us a head start to in the market because we brought core expertise in and client product knowledge in a way that, I remember long back we were dealing with a company that manufactured food fuel dispensing units, and it was almost prohibitory in our team to refer to any element of the product without its actual, by not referring it to it by the company name or the ISO standard. So nobody would just use the word nozzle or say this is the keypad or say that this is a, this is we would not say that it's a pump station. We would
Right.
always use, and that's also the kind of rigor that we've put all our colleagues through and still hold ourselves to.
Right. So you talked about, the business implications also of a criminal investigation, because you also, as a lawyer, needs to, you know, think about from the perspective of a company. How would a dispute or an investigation play out? There are reputational issues also involved, sensitive matters that come up. So, how and what distinguishes organizations that navigates these kinds of crises effectively from those that struggle, according to you?
Kaustubh, it all starts, one can put whatever name it is to it, and every couple of years there are always new words that emerge. Some days back it was compliance, now it's governance, and somebody will call it ethics, then somebody calls it trust and safety. It's ultimately the same thing. Organizations that navigate crisis well have strong leadership that says we may have made mistakes, let's get to the bottom of those mistakes and let's not repeat them. And there is full support to ensuring that we identify all the issues and we ensure that we fix all those issues. The companies that survive are these. Rest in terms of you can have the best administration and best project management teams who have great PR consultants and great lawyers and great forensic accountants and great strategists, etc., etc.
Right.
Project management never wins the day.
Mm.
Organizations that survive crisis, organizations that survive scandal are those that have leadership commitment, um, both at a commitment level and also I would call crisis leadership. And crisis leadership is very different from standard leadership. Standard leadership when there is product innovation and that's being lauded, when the share price is on the rise, there's a very different structure to this. This is a leadership that involves accepting and owning mistakes. This is a leadership that involves taking difficult decisions. Uh, Companies that take decisions to, for example, let go of extremely profitable superstar executives because they don't pass the smell test. Those are the companies that really come out of crisis well. Of course, um, everything else is critical. I'm not going to downplay that you need sound teams, you need good management, you need a cohesive approach. Your lawyers and your PR teams and your market facing teams and your business teams all have to work together. But this is the core. There was a saying that, an old German criminal law professor once told me when I was working in Germany, that we get paid most of our fee to make a decision. We get 90% of the fee is to decide on how we are going to, what plea we are going to take. And 10% is for all the paperwork. And that's exactly the same analogy I would use here. 90% is leadership and 10% is everything else.
Perfectly. I think it was the perfect answer that anybody could get from that question. Now I'd like to also, delve into the role that you play, which is also as a managing partner of PBS. Your leadership has, you know, taken the firm to great heights, and law firm management is something that a managing partner has to deal with on a daily basis. Managing the law firm, so, law firm management has changed very little over the decades, even as the businesses that law firms advise have transformed. What do you think needs to evolve?
So, Kaustubh, thanks. I'll take that both as a compliment and also something that I have a significant amount of imposter syndrome on. Um, so let me start with, um, you're absolutely right, and this is my core view as well. And a couple of years back, I was with Professor David Wilkins at the Harvard Leadership Program, and he echoed similarly placed sentiments that we are the least innovative businesses in the world. That emanates from couple of challenges. That emanates from this producer manager challenge, where lawyers, you can be managing partner but you're also running a practice, so none of us leave our practices to come into management, number one. And if we do, we also lose the pulse. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So you get stuck in this producer manager syndrome. The second element is none of us are actually trained for law firm leadership, and nobody is trained for law firm leadership. So ultimately, organizations over the last 100 years have taken bets on people and then assumed that what they picked up as young adults, what they picked up as young professionals, who their mentors were, will somehow prepare them for leading large organizations. So our problems in law firm management and law firm leadership have not changed in the last 100 years, to be very honest. Law firms that have succeeded have managed to curtail those problems. Law firms that have succeeded but not succeeded as much as they should have deal with the same problems, and those that have failed and packed up deal with the same issues. You can write the post-mortem of some of the law firms that were the biggest at the start of the century have just recently merged, to ensure their survival. So you'll largely find the same issues that emerge. So when I got the reins honestly by default. When you become a founding member to a law firm, you sort of take on a lot of entrepreneurial roles by itself. But I think something that my partners and I felt very strongly about right at the beginning is that we've got to do this scientifically. And we very early on figured out that there is very little innovation in the market. So if you ask me for what became the mantra became being contrarian. If a large Indian law firm was doing it, PBS will not do it. That was the mantra. If if we felt that something that didn't work for us when we were at other law firms, we ensured we won't do it. Now, are we perfect? No, we are not. Long way to go, lots to learn, but that became the founding principle. That's also the principle with which we make all our decisions today. So a couple of things that really boiled into the, and then so on the scientific piece of it, so one was of course our pop culture view of being contrarian. That was also part of our personality. That was also part of our sort of DNA as an organization. But I think the second part was to go at it scientifically. And my partners gave me a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes and errors, but also backed us when it came to staying with a particular vision. And each time we presented a vision, we presented it with data. We studied other law firms. Like my majority of my time today actually goes in studying other law firms all around the world. What are they doing? What are they not doing? And then drawing parallels to how are other businesses um, innovating, because our clients are innovating at a speed that the entirety of law firms in the world would not be able to catch up with. The pace of artificial intelligence or the audacity of thought, the whole world, if you take technology and assume we were all law firms, we would have capped out at search engines, and we would have capped out at a world which had a Yahoo and a Google. But look at the audacity that technology companies bring. Look at the level. At every 3 years, 5 years, your phone screen looks different. Do our contracts, do our non-disclosure agreements look different? Do our bail applications look different? Do our quashing petitions look that different? Absolutely not. Do the structures of our law firms, do our promotion cycles look different? Do our equity structures look different? As in, for 100 years, we've called it lockstep and eat what you kill, and we've still not been able to figure it out. And look at what our clients, who we are trusted advisors to, look at the barriers they are breaking. If technology companies had been content with the way the internet looked earlier, there would be no artificial intelligence. And when artificial intelligence kicked into being, every 6 to 8 months we are seeing such great leaps forward. So majority of my time today is really studying these. Outside the practice, of course, is studying these businesses, studying what law firms didn't do, and bridging that gap in a way that fits our size and scale, but leaving the DNA of being contrarian, audacious, and ambitious together.
Absolutely. So also within the, law firm management, one of the most important aspects is how young lawyers are treated by a law firm, by any organization for that matter. Like young lawyers these days want competitive compensation, clear growth paths, and transparency around their progression. So how does PBS, take that into account?
Look, I think on compensation, we started out, Kaustubh, right from the very beginning. We never viewed ourselves as we're a small firm, boutique firm, etc. So that becomes a license to pay people less. To be very honest, right from the very beginning, our compensation structures were extremely competitive. Competitive, as in we would usually be tier whatever you refer to as the tier of large corporate law firms in India, full service law firms. We would either be at par or generally a little higher. And I think that's a fundamental commitment you have to make to colleagues who come and work with you. Your office doesn't matter, the couch doesn't matter, if those who are going to be spending the greatest hours working on briefs don't get compensated for it. So in fact, and we walked that talk. We started out with a very small office, and before we moved to larger office spaces, we ensured that people were paid. We didn't say that this is something that will happen in the future. We didn't keep selling a dream. So I think that was so. On compensation, we have our own metric. We've followed a merit-based metric. People know that at our firm, promotions will follow on merit, and the merit will not be one that where you need to wait extraordinarily. Because look at the age profile of the founders of all our unicorns. But no, when it comes to law, somehow we have these imaginary paths that have been made. In 4 years, you stay associate, then you become SA for X years, then you become this, then you get batch matched. As in, this is all, socialistic. So these are all socialistic measures of when somebody should become partner or when they shouldn't, or you can't make somebody something. If lawyers demonstrate, and in a generation that has access to the internet, that has access to artificial intelligence, you have to reward them for their innovation, for their hustle, and for their ambition. And that's really the core of what our system is. It is to ensure that we don't miss talent, we don't miss out on merit. We identify it, there's deep selection, and it gets rewarded. So on compensation, I think we've generally followed a philosophy that PBS's superstars will get compensated 30 to 40% more than market, and more than their competitors. That's been a philosophy. That's something that we have a stated commitment to our colleagues. Now I'm saying it on a podcast, so I can't go back on my words and be publicly humiliated subsequently for being called out on something like this. Compensation is the core. We all work extremely hard. When we put in those 2,000, 3,000 hours a year, we are all working extremely hard, and we must get rewarded, and we must get rewarded commensurate to our efforts. We shouldn't have arbitrary figures. We have a no cap bonus policy.
Hmm.
So you can't put an arbitrary figure that you will get 4 lakh rupees as a first year associate, plus there is some vague, bonus residual that's kept. It's got to, superstars will get it. So will get compensated differently. And it's no cap. And I think that's, so people do get, and I think, is any model right or wrong? No, only time will tell. But yes, so we do have differential compensation across our entire firm. But there is also clarity of what constitutes merit and what constitutes working hard, and um, what takes you into superstar category. And our superstars speak for themselves. So I think that was the model when it came to compensation. Culture is very important, putting respect at the center of it. We all work in high stress environments. In our practices as specialists, ours is like the emergency room of a hospital always. Clients don't come to us checking in on whether we slept the previous night or not. Very similar to the emergency room of a hospital if a disaster strikes. So we have to balance both worlds. We have to balance how much time people can take, how much time people can't take, when our pens down, when our pens on. I don't think we figure it out, Kaustubh. I'll be very honest to say that, are we able to figure out the trials and tribulations of work-life balance that comes in the legal profession? No, I won't even lie about it. We've all had our share of all-nighters. We've all had our share of swollen eyes from staring at screens. But I think in our way, we were one of the first firms that brought in a pens down annual policy, and it's significantly generous during the last 2 weeks of the year. We are pens down during Diwali. We also try and club in our long weekends to ensure, and those are pens down. We talk to clients, we take it on the chin. There is no question of revenue loss, unless of course there is a liberty or incarceration related crisis where we will do a compensatory off. So we've got that. We focus on standing by our teams in times of crisis, sabbaticals, so on and so forth. We do our best, but there's a long way to go. We are all learning. We are all learning how to evolve in this space. And I think on transparency, cost of transparency comes from the by walking the talk. If you tell people that merit is great, but everybody gets promoted at year 5 together, irrespective of their merit, then you're not walking the talk. So I think we've walked the talk sufficiently in terms of our promotions, in terms of our compensation, for people to know. And we've lost great colleagues who didn't meet that marker, who may have joined and had a great friend when they joined, but the friend has, in year 3, is going to get promoted to senior associate because they've been spectacular. And the other colleague who's also good, not taking away, but is not spectacular and isn't achieving the acme of excellence that's necessary, or hasn't got those upskills. And all of us can have different journeys. But if you don't walk that talk, if you're going to worry about friendships, what are people going to say, who's going to stay or who's going to leave, then that's not a promise you're making to meritocracy, and that's not a promise you're making to excellence. And that's something that where we try and walk the talk every day. And I think that's how our colleagues also view it.
Right. So, it was very interesting to understand the kinds of new initiatives that you are taking, whether it be, the PBS superstars or the internal policy of leaves and all that. So quite interesting to understand that. Now I'd like to, focus a bit on the AI, which is no longer a buzzword and it tangibly affects our lives today. Beyond efficiency gains, how do you see AI reshaping the structure of law firms? Does it push firms towards being leaner and more nimble rather than large and overweight?
Look, I think technology, cost of always makes lawyers better.
Yeah.
It's going to make good lawyers great. And at the end of the day, we are all fighting a small battle of all of us can give, the whole market can give good advice. You need to be an exceptionally terrible lawyer and you should be disbarred if you can't give good advice. The question is, which one of us, we, who amongst us can give great advice and great and strategic advice? So that's the delta we are all fighting about. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard interpretation of most things. And even before AI came in, you could find you could figure out most interpretations through a simple Google search. I view AI as a tool that's going to help good lawyers become great. I think it's also going to help younger lawyers who may not have come from privileged backgrounds where English was not their first language, when our entire body of law in India is in English, and they have the support, because otherwise they're virtually learning a language in the first few years of their career and not really refining their legal skills. So I am viewing artificial intelligence in making the quality of our advice better. And honestly, none of us like doing the tasks that were earlier taking up time. And I think specialist firms like ours, who don't need to throw bodies at matters, you know, view AI as God sent. I can assure you, Kaustubh, that more lawyers have stopped practicing law because of deal rooms and documents in deal rooms and a software called Relativity, where you go through documents day on, which is a necessary evil for diligence, but because of how repetitive it is. If AI can, or making indexes of what documents have come in and what documents have gone out, or pagination, so on and so forth. So where technology is going to help us is taking out those tasks so we bring ourselves back to the law. I think it's going to really shrink career paths significantly in terms of when somebody becomes an associate to when they become a partner, or when they become capable of advising a client, because there's going to be more focus on core law than all this other unnecessary tasks that would take up time. Uh, it's a lot like the world looked when the Microsoft suite came in and we suddenly had Microsoft Word. As in, the world worked on stenographers before that. Briefs got written and rewritten and rewritten, and there were corrections made all through stenographers and corrections, and shorthand was important. You can barely find a clerk today in Delhi who knows who, or in any large city with a high court, who knows shorthand anymore. So, these are not skills that are existential to lawyers or law firms, and we've got to embrace them as excellence drivers, as time savers, and of making lawyers islands amongst themselves, as opposed to the traditional path. Remember, we've never had structured approach to training in any law firm anywhere across the world. It's all anecdotal training. It all depends on who your mentor is and how they train you, or the learning by observation. So I think this allows a lot. This The one goal becomes a push towards excellence and taking out routine mundane tasks that would otherwise become key skills that you needed as a lawyer to succeed. But I think more importantly, law firms need to, and lawyers for that matter, need to define very precise goals as to what they wish to achieve from AI. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot like Microsoft Paint. We all had it back in the day. Very few of us knew what to do with it, barring, making some shapes and inserting colors in them. There was very little you figured out in terms of professional deployment. So it's not a tool to just have to play around with. You've got to have a clear strategy of what you wish to achieve from artificial intelligence and what goal it intends to serve. It's otherwise like having Word but not knowing what you're going to use it for.
Right. So a lot of due diligence and responsible use of AI is something that you are suggesting.
I would say define tasks that should not be taking up billable hours or non-billable hours for that matter, that are contributors to fatigue. And bring the lawyering back to what matters. Bring the lawyer to the top of the pyramid, not the base of the pyramid.
Right. Right. So also, talking about the rise of foreign law firms that are, now coming into India, and the new phase where we are gradually opening the Indian legal market. So how do you think it is going to not just, impact on the work, but also have a significant impact on Indian firms, on the way Indian firms are managed? When they look at how, foreign law firms are managed, how are they going to change the Indian legal system?
So, Costa, let me start out by saying the foreign law firms are no better or no less managed than our law firms. Okay. So maybe 20 years ago there were things to borrow, but now we're all in the same we're all in the same pool. So I don't think anybody is exceptionally better managed than an Indian law firm. Yes, there are practices, and I'm sure there are practices that Indian law firms have that the foreign law firms would like to borrow as well. Um, but let me come to the central question. I have been firm and resolute in my view that foreign law firms have to be allowed into India. They've got to come in, and we cannot be a protectionist market. This phased wise, gradual, none of these are necessary. Competition is always good for the market, and it is markets grow, markets thrive because of competition. There's a reason why you have an antitrust law. It is to promote fair competition in the market. So I have all along, not today, not at the time the draft rules were put out, I have all along been a firm supporter of foreign law firms entering the Indian market. It's critical to our competition, and it's critical to create new opportunities. Cost of the sad challenge is that all of us in established law firms in the country owe a duty to the next generation. And that duty emanates from the fact that our salaries, our day zero salaries, the top package to a law student is not even inflation adjusted. For virtually the last 15 years, the numbers have been hovering around the same. So we aren't able to drive that growth or that opportunity for the future generation of law students. We have so many coming in, and we need to create more opportunities for them and let them come in, and we owe it to them. And secondly, nothing is going to happen to us. Nothing is going to happen to Indian law firms. Look, there is no use case anywhere in the world of when the foreign law firms came to Germany, or they came to London, or that they came to Singapore, where the national law firms have not survived. They have rather, in certain cases, thrived. Rates have gone up. Rates have become more competitive. We've, for the size of our economy and the role we wish to play in the world as a nation, we've got to, if the Fortune 50 companies can be here, why can the world's 20 largest law firms not be here to support their clients? So we've got to rethink this in its entirety, and we've got to come out of this fear psychosis that something is going to happen. Our current framework that's here is already extremely supportive towards Indian law firms, in an unfair way to foreign law firms, in a way that they may not want to come because of how unfair it is. But we've got to open up our doors. If Indian e-commerce can compete with global e-commerce, look at the kind of revolution a Blinkit has brought about. And look at, we are capable of building our own revolutions. We are capable of building in our own innovations. And I think we've got to come out of this fear psychosis and embrace the inevitable.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. So, it's so wonderful to hear that you are open to competition, and that's because that's the only way Indian law firm market is going to evolve for
Also,
the
we were a law firm born in competition, right? When we came around, all the work that we have carved out for ourselves was held by the large law firms in the country. So we were born out of competition. So we had to carve out our market, grow our market share without the resources, without a large coffer, without an inheritance, none of that. So we were born out of competition. So we will always view competition as something that we will embrace. We will always competition is what made us what we are. We're never going to turn our back on competition.
right. So good to hear that. Now I'd like to, move beyond the profession and the law and talk about your passions and interests outside of the law that keep you motivated and energized and, keep you up and about.
That's the law. I used to always find it to be such a cliche, and as part of my original contrarian views, I used to always feel that this overtly used cliche of the law is a jealous mistress is something that's a cliche. But I think there are some things which the world tells you that you weren't as wise about, and this is one of them. So the law takes up most of my time, to be very, very honest. And anybody in a crisis practice, there's an Instagram meme that's going around that I'm in a job that says that after this week I'll get free, and then the next, and then there is, and you say that on repeat. And I've probably been saying this for the last 10 odd years that this week is really busy, the next week will be easier. And that's how it happened. That's also what went down with the scheduling of this podcast. But leaving that aside, what have been constant companions? First things first, I read a lot. I've always enjoyed reading. I consume a large amount of information from varied sources. I don't read outside what I need to do for my practice and my briefs. I don't read about the law at all. I read about a whole host of things which are as diverse, from philosophy to business to brand wars to you name it. And history, South Asian history, most importantly, World War II history. I remain a big military buff, and I follow a lot of strategic affairs in that regard. So reading is one constant companion. It's probably it 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 takes up a significant portion of my day. The second is music. I can't sing, I can't play an instrument to save my life, but I always have a soundtrack on. I'm extremely passionate about various bands and musicians, and that's there's always music around me. There's music in my car, there's music in my home, there's music in my office, and that's something that's been a constant. Outside these two sort of day-to-day events, I enjoy I enjoy motorcycling. I've just come back from a trip which is on the new route to Ladakh via Darcha and Purne. Um, Off-roading, that's another passion of mine. I ride horses, and I still shoot, not competitively, but I shoot for fun. I enjoy my travel, and I enjoy good food. So whenever I am traveling on work, which is 170, 180, sometimes 200 plus days a year, I ensure that I eat well wherever I am. Uh, I enjoy my fine dining, and I enjoy my junk food, and that gives me a lot of joy and pleasure.
Wonderful to know the personal side of Sherbir. When you said music, my eyeballs got stuck at the Marshall sitting right behind you.
Precisely. There you go.
Yeah.
There's the Marshall here. There's my record player on the other side of my office that you would have seen when you had come over with
Yes.
with my favorite records in the office. And then there's all different shapes and forms of speakers around, because all sorts of music needs a different speaker.
Right. So any book that you'd like to recommend to our viewers, since you said that you are a voracious reader and you read a lot of different things.
It depends who I'm making a recommendation to. But assuming I'm making a recommendation to my future colleagues at the bar, I would recommend two books. I would recommend Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Um, Malcolm, you must always start your careers with audacity and
Absolutely.
hope, and a commitment that you're going to really break barriers. you know if you go by our standard definition of success, it's there. But as young people, you have a significantly and as young professionals, you have a significantly larger weight on your shoulders of redefining the law that you get into. That's the same way a Mark Zuckerberg had to reshaping the internet and social communication, or Larry had at when it came to Google. So that needs audacity, and for that I would recommend that you read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell to just change the scope and imbibe a sense of audacity. The second book that I would strongly recommend everybody reads is On Writing Well by William Zinsner. Irrespective of what AI does, even to tell if AI is writing well and giving you the right work product, you need to understand the fundamentals of it. And I think there are two individuals in the world who've done a great job of it. William Zinsner does a far more um, I enjoy reading how he has broken down how you should write well. Of course, there's Steven Pinker as well, the celebrated Harvard University professor who's also published extensively in this space. So these are the two books that I would strongly recommend everyone reads. And anybody who's getting into corporate law, I would also recommend that you read um, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and you read Zia Modi's 10 Judgments That Defined India. This would be my starting care package for anybody who's starting their career.
Thank you so much. You are also quite active on X, and not many people would know, but I also follow you on X. So, anyone who follows you will notice that your interests extend well beyond legal practice. And, I just wanted to understand, how important do you think it is for lawyers to engage in these conversations outside of the law? And how has it helped you in your career or in your daily life?
Look, I don't think it's had any effect in my career. My Twitter or X profile is entirely things that I ramble on. I'm surprised anybody reads it. So thank you, Kaustubh, for reading what I what I write there. So I'm not super active there, to be very honest. I used to be many years ago when it was a new platform, almost 10 years ago. Now it's more sparingly used. It's a platform where I have a voice on things that are other than the law. Look, I'm not a big believer in I I think you all of us need to figure out where we consume information from that's relevant to our practices. So I think on that front, for certain practices, it could be X. Like I always need to have the enforcement and political pulse of the land to know how I strategically plan the defense in my cases. And I think I get some pulse on that on X. That's probably the only link I have to it professionally. But other than that, it's sort of personal, exposition space. As far as what do platforms have for lawyers? Look, each to their own. I am generally a conservative when it comes to these platforms. I probably post a lot less on LinkedIn than most of my peers do. I've been forced and cajoled into posting a little more every now and then, but I still do what I wish to do. I don't think these, I find too many of these. I keep seeing these reels and etc. about some of these new age mentors to law students who keep and young professionals who keep saying you should have a brand. You know, brands aren't going to get built by being on LinkedIn, and brands aren't going to get built by showing up at a conference, or brands aren't going to get built by an Instagram page. That's not what your target audience wants. Your target audience wants a lawyer who delivers. So focus at where the result that actually matters. Use all of them. Now again, each their own. This is my personal view, so I'm not here to denigrate anybody who uses them extensively. If it works for them, it works for them. My view is it doesn't. That's not what your target audience is going to view, and your target audience doesn't want to know where you've had coffee on Instagram after going to court, or know you've got a stack of files on your desk. That a client ultimately wants to know, how are you going to represent them, whether in court or against a counterparty, or protect their interests in a commercial negotiation, or in a deal. And results speak more than anything else. And markets have a way of sizing themselves up. I Because I travel so much, I end up watching a lot of stuff if I'm not reading on flights. And I was watching The Romantics, where Aditya Chopra said something very tellingly about how markets operate. And he sort of makes a reference to how the biggest production house in the country could not launch his brother Uday Chopra, who was a fantastic method actor, but the audience just didn't accept him. And that's a lot like how a lawyer's reputation works. You can try as hard as you want. You can be on every platform. You can write an op-ed a week, but the market has to accept you. And the market will accept you through great quality lawyering. Everything else is noise. Everything else, the marginal luck somebody may have because their parent was a lawyer or a celebrated jurist or a judge, marginal values. There's several of us standing here without having anybody in the law, knowing nobody in Delhi, not belonging to Delhi. Cities embrace you, clients embrace you, companies embrace you, courts embrace you, but it boils down to the product, and the product is your advocacy. So focus on strengthening your product. I really want to shout out and tell a bunch of younger colleagues and say, guys, spend lesser time on the gram or these convoluted posts on social media. Get it back to the acme of skill. Bring it, make that investment of 2000, 3000, 5000 hours on core law. Know the law from its genesis, where it started in the world. If somebody is using the poison pill defense, where did it emanate from? What were the circumstances? What was US securities law and commercial law at that point of time when this happened? How did it get resonance in Europe? How does it apply to us? Get into the depth. That is going to ensure that when you have your day in the sun, and all of us get our day in the sun, it's just a question of who amongst us has sunscreen that day and who doesn't, because that's what ensures how much longer we stay out in the sun.
Right. Thanks, Sherbir, for all the experiences that you've shared so generously. I'm sure our audience has enjoyed this conversation as much as I have.
Thank you, Kaustubh. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having me. It was an absolute honor, and wishing you and the podcast all the very best.
Thank you.